Hello there. Today is going to be a little different. I figured it was about time to do a follow up to what is by far the most popular episode of Keep the Flow. If you caught my episode about getting out of the creative roundabout, this one's the natural next step. And if you didn't, no worries, I'll catch you up. In that episode, I talked about feeling stuck in a creative roundabout, like Clark Griswold in European Vacation, just circling around London, pointing at Big Ben.
Yes.
We know, Big Ben.
Parliament.
I talked about how the phrase, what got you here won't get you there, from the business world, can be applied to creative careers, and suggested writing down 3 actions to help you break out of that cycle. Some of you reached out after that episode sharing your own roundabout experiences, and one question that kept coming up was, okay, I know I need to do something different, but how do I figure out what that something is? So that's what we're diving into today. And here's a little backstory as to why I'm making this episode. About 10 years ago, I hit my own creative plateau after moving from New York to Iceland. In New York, I was constantly challenged as a professional musician. The scene there demands growth just to keep up. When I moved to Iceland, I started teaching more. And between that and the local gigs I was doing, I thought I could maintain my musicianship. But I started feeling my abilities slipping, and psychologically, something shifted. The idea of merely maintaining instead of advancing became kind of depressing. I realized I'd fallen into a roundabout of my own making. The change came when I realized that I needed to deliberately build curiosity and practice back into my routine, a routine that was not existent at the time. But I started going in early to practice and compose before teaching. Also, I signed up for Patreon as a place to show my work, and I began writing about music that inspired me in my newsletter. Having that expectation of a stream of new compositions to show my patrons served as a reminder to keep writing music, and the expectation of providing music reviews for my readers has kept me on a constant search for new inspiration. What I discovered was that waiting for external challenges wasn't enough. I needed to create internal challenges and accountability systems that would push me forward regardless of my environment. And just to be clear, I'm not dissing the Icelandic music scene. There is actually an unusually large talent pool here considering the size of the country. It's great. But as far as intensity and size and the energy of a scene goes, it's hard for any place to compete with New York. But my wife and I decided to give that up for a higher quality of life overall and for a more child-friendly place to live. And I'm really glad we did. Maybe you're in a similar situation. Perhaps not that you're going to be moving to Iceland, but perhaps you've moved to a smaller market, or life circumstances have changed your creative routine. The question becomes, how do you create your own growth framework when the external structure falls away? That brings me back to the phrase I used in the first Roundabout episode. What got you here won't get you there. But this time I'm looking at it less from a business point of view and more from a creative fulfillment perspective. Now, in my case, I found myself in a completely different life. New language, becoming a parent, becoming gainfully employed as a teacher, learning to drive stick shift. That might have actually been the hardest thing. I had to find a new road that fit with my new situation. But for most people, this is going to be about figuring out how to get out of that roundabout and back on the main road. What got you here was probably a lot of hard work, and maybe you got to a place where you felt like you could coast, and your past experience taught you that with more experience, you would just keep getting better. Like a fine wine, you would just get better with age. Except I don't think we're wine or even a fancy cheese that matures over time. What if we're the crackers, and with age, we just get stale. And at this point, I'm losing track of how many metaphors I'm mixing. But the thing is, it's okay. We're supposed to get stale. We're supposed to get stuck in roundabouts as long as we're aware of it and we take action to correct for it. What got you here might have been a lot of hard work, and continuing to work hard is a virtuous thing, don't get me wrong, but maybe what you need to get out of the roundabout is to think differently, to try things that are outside of your comfort zone. As a jazz musician, one of the legends that we all worship is Miles Davis. He is held up as an example of an artist who was constantly reinventing himself. He was on the cutting edge of so many stylistic movements in jazz. But why? He made Kind of Blue in 1959, which was the best-selling jazz album of all time, still is. He could have just stopped there. He had reached the peak. But the peak for him was just another roundabout. He went on to reshape what we think of as jazz at least 3 times after that. I think of Miles as an artist who was acutely aware of falling into patterns and rebelling against his own complacency. But he's an extreme example. I'm not suggesting that we all have to completely reinvent ourselves whenever we feel stuck. I'm just saying that the first step is to be aware. Be honest with yourself. Take inventory. The problem is that most of us don't take inventory until things get really bad. But we need to recognize that falling into patterns is a normal part of being creative. As long as we can see it, that's the crucial thing. The realization that we're in the roundabout is the thing that will get us out of it, or at least the thing that will send us looking for how to get out of it. This is important because sometimes what feels like stagnation can actually be necessary development time. Other times we convince ourselves we're working on things when we're really just going through familiar motions. Here are some signs that you might actually be in a roundabout. You're busy but not challenged. You're repeating the same types of projects or gigs without growth. That voice in your head keeps suggesting you try something different, but you keep putting it off. You find yourself saying, I should really blah, blah, blah about the same creative goals month after month. On the other hand, signs of real progress might be subtle. You're encountering new problems you've never faced before. The key difference? Forward movement usually involves some level of discomfort or uncertainty. Roundabouts feel familiar, even when they're frustrating. In The Obstacle is the Way, Ryan Holiday expounds on Stoic philosopher / Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius's idea of running towards discomfort. The things we try to avoid in our lives are often the challenges we need to grow. This is doubly true for creative pursuits. Instead of avoiding that uncomfortable feeling, we can learn to run toward it. When you feel that slight anxiety about starting a project you're not sure you're ready for, or reaching out to a bigger venue, or a collaborator you idolize, or when you're submitting to a prestigious publication or sharing more personal work, that's your compass pointing you towards your next level. One of the biggest shifts that I've experienced is transitioning from primarily being a sideman to leading my own projects. The biggest challenge hasn't been musical, it's been psychological and practical. For musicians, when you become a leader, you're suddenly responsible for everything. You have the final word on creative decisions, and you're financially responsible. It's a lot to take on, but it also brings up deeper questions about what good leadership looks like in a creative context. I've learned that being a leader doesn't mean doing everything alone. Everyone I work with, the musicians, engineers, my wife who runs the record label with me, they all make valuable contributions. Remembering to acknowledge those contributions and listen to everyone has been crucial to making projects successful. This is where the implementation gap shows up, the difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it. I knew for years that I wanted to lead more of my own projects, but actually making that happen required a fundamental shift in how I saw myself. Here are three practical ways that I've found to close that implementation gap. Number one, schedule it. Literally put it in your calendar. Tuesday, 9 to 10 a.m. Try something different creatively. Treat it like you would a gig or client meeting, non negotiable. Time blocking is an incredibly effective motivator, I've found. I don't really know why, but I've had much more success with putting things in my calendar than on my to do list. Number two, start impossibly small. Not all of us have this luxury, I know. If you're doing client work, you just have to do what's required. But in your personal projects, you do have personal projects, right? Right, that's what I thought. We should all have personal projects, and in those, making progress can be incremental. We don't have to be overwhelmed to feel like we're accomplishing something. So start small. One sketch every morning, or write one bar of music after lunch. Whatever it is, I just think small and expand from there. And number three, focus on identity change. This might be the most important part of closing the implementation gap. Frame your actions around who you want to become rather than what you want to achieve. Instead of, I need to send these emails, think, I am becoming the kind of artist who consistently promotes their work. Instead of, I need to paint a picture every day, think, I'm becoming a painter with a steady creative output. When your actions align with your desired identity, they become part of who you are instead of just items on your to do list. Okay, I know I said I was going to focus on the creative fulfillment side of things, but in this last part, the lines are a little blurred. And I wanted to share this because it helped me immensely as a way to get out of my roundabout. When I think about the business side of creativity, there's one skill that's had more impact than I ever expected: connecting with the audience. And honestly, I didn't initially think of audience connection as a business skill. I thought of it in purely artistic terms. But as I gained more experience, I realized how profoundly it affects the business side of what we do. When you genuinely connect with your audience, they're more engaged with the work. That engagement translates directly to more interest and sales. It impacts how many people sign up for your newsletter. It affects how the venue owner perceives your performance. It influences whether they'll book you again and what they tell other venues about you. And while as a musician, I'm a performing artist, I think this holds true even for people who aren't up on stage. Any sort of audience interaction, whether that's online or at a gallery show or a reading or interview, anytime we have an opportunity to address our audience, if we embrace that with the enthusiasm of as if it's reversed, as if we're there to see them, just to get a peek behind the curtain to see what the audience is really like. If we can embrace the audience with that sort of enthusiasm, it will go a long way towards creating long term fans. And trust me, I know a lot of artists who are introverts. I'm actually on the spectrum and I need a lot of alone time. But if we can find a way to do this in a way that feels honest and authentic, the benefits are amazing. Many artists resist thinking about the business side because it feels at odds with creativity, but finding these natural intersection points where what we're doing feels artistically right but also happens to be good business, it can transform your creative career. Here's something that might sound counterintuitive. Sometimes the way out of your creative roundabout is by saying no more often. When I recognized I was stuck in my own roundabout, I was saying yes to pretty much every sideman gig that came my way. I had all but stopped writing my own music, even though there was a voice in the back of my head constantly telling me I needed to do my own thing. The breakthrough came when I realized that in order to get out of my roundabout, I needed to stop saying yes to everything that came my way and focus more intentionally on my own music. Every yes to someone else's project was an implicit no to my own creative direction. But here's what made this strategy particularly challenging. Saying no to familiar opportunities was deeply uncomfortable. There's security in taking every gig that comes your way, even if it's not advancing your own creative goals. Turning down work meant facing uncertainty about income, about staying visible in the scene, about whether my own projects would actually succeed. This is where Ryan Holiday's concept from "the obstacle is the way" became crucial for me. The discomfort of saying no wasn't a sign I was making a mistake. It was the very thing I needed to do. It was the very thing I needed to lean into. The obstacle wasn't the uncomfortable feelings. The obstacle was my avoidance of those feelings that kept me stuck in the roundabout. Learning to run toward that discomfort, to say no to the safe but unfulfilling opportunities, created the space and the urgency I needed to pursue my own creative direction. The anxiety about turning down work became my signal that I was finally prioritizing what mattered most. This doesn't mean never collaborating or only doing your own thing, but it does mean being strategic about where you invest your limited time and energy. Sometimes what looks like opportunity can actually be distraction in disguise. Ask yourself, is saying yes to this opportunity moving me towards my bigger creative goals, or is it just keeping me busy within my comfortable roundabout? And if the answer makes you a little uncomfortable, that might be exactly the direction you need to go. Okay, let's get practical. How do you figure out what those 3 action items should actually be? First, look at people one step ahead of you on a similar path, not the superstars. They're usually too far removed from your current reality. Look at the people just slightly ahead of you. What specific actions did they take to get there? I've noticed a pattern among musicians I respect who've built a sustainable career with their own projects. It rarely comes down to some grand strategy or some major breakthrough moment. It's usually about consistency and fundamentals, regular communication with their audience, steady creation of new material, and persistent outreach to venues and festivals. The common thread isn't flashy tactics, but rather just showing up and consistently doing the essential but unglamorous work. Second, identify your blind spots. We all have them. Ask a trusted peer or mentor, what do you see that I'm missing? Sometimes the actions we need to take are obvious to everyone but ourselves. And third, consider what you've been avoiding. Often the thing we're reluctant to do is exactly the thing that would move us forward. For me, it was learning how to effectively promote my own work without feeling like I'm being pushy or self important. I'd love to hear about your own creative roundabout, what steps you're taking to get out of it. If you feel comfortable enough with it, please share your experience in the comments or head over to patreon.com/ScottMcLemore, where we can get deeper into these topics. And here's a simple challenge. This week, identify just one thing that you've been saying yes to that might actually be keeping you in your roundabout. Then consider what creative pursuit you could redirect that energy toward instead. If this resonated with you, check out the episode I did about why forcing creativity never works and what actually does, which you can click on here. Or if you still haven't seen the original Creative Roundabout episode, you can watch that here. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep the flow.